Okay, so I don't know how many of you are as interested in the concept or the topic of attention as I am and how it affects our perception of the world. I do have some attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's definitely in my family, and my niece and nephew have both been diagnosed. I have actually had my niece come and talk one time about her attention and her perception, because she also has dyslexia, dyscalculia, and a central auditory processing disorder. So regardless of how we're getting the information into her brain, it's not being sequenced. But then she has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so it's not being sequenced, but there's also her attention is, oh, bunny, yeah, so yeah, like that. It's a fascinating topic to me, and in some ways it bothers me a little bit that your author sticks with visual attention, but as I said, there's so much research on the visual modality, and honestly, it would have been, I think, difficult for him to include much more. But so usually I, in class, do a dichotic listening task, if you guys know what that is or want to go look that up, and it's fun to kind of watch the person struggle with listening to two people talk in two different ears and shadow and say something, say one of them out to the class, and it's just kind of shows that in the auditory modality we have a similar kind of bottleneck, although exactly what's happening is pretty different, because typically the visual world is staying stable. And as I look around in my garden right now, my eyes move, and so it's constantly changing. But if I look away and look back at something, it's going to be in the same place, so it's going to stay there. Whereas me talking right now, this auditory modality, it's here and it's gone. So there are some differences when we are talking about perception and attention. But we're going to stick with the visual world as we are doing this online. And for some of these PowerPoints, for some of my talks, I went into the book, or it might have been an old edition of the book, and went to his questions at the very beginning of Goldstein's questions, and asked the question to you all, do we answer these questions? And so it's a blue question, and right now you don't know the answer, but I come back to this at the end of, after we finish talking about visual attention. So you might jot them down and just see if you feel like we're answering the questions of, I'm going to tell you we are kind of answering the questions, but you want to make sure you understand the answers. So how do observers seek out new stimuli? Why do we perceive some things from our environment and not others? And how do these active processes really shape our perception of the world? So attention gets talked about in a number of ways by different researchers, and they're all correct. So attention does a number of things for us. One, we will talk about attention as the glue, that it creates a coherent experience out of the multiple features of the world that we are seeing, in this case, because it's visual attention, that we are seeing at a time, that we are hearing, feeling, all of that gets glued together somehow. Attention is also seen as the director, okay, when it is selecting from available input, when I have to selectively attend to one thing and ignore or inhibit other information coming in. Attention is also seen as the scheduler. When we are talking about divided attention, we are really scheduling our attention back and forth across simultaneous tasks. And I'm going to start by talking about selective attention, which is, again, focusing on specific aspects of our environment and really ignoring others, kind of inhibiting the information from about things that we don't want to pay attention to. And in this case, it is considered the director. And then I have just a reminder that divided attention is paying attention to several things at once. We tend to call it multitasking, and it is considered the scheduler. And I like scheduler more than multitasking, because we're really not multitasking. We are scheduling our attention back and forth between multiple things. So whenever we are doing one of the two tasks or three tasks or however many tasks we give ourselves, we are ignoring the other tasks. And if it's okay, if you can go back and forth, it's still somewhat difficult, especially if you have some ADHD like I do, but you're not really doing both tasks at once. And there's some suggestion that really automatic tasks, you can do something automatic while you're paying attention to something else. But even there, I think there are times when your full attention isn't on that specific task. If you want your full attention to be there, your full attention, you really need to stop the automatic task even. But we're going to spend most of our time in selective attention at first. He actually used to not discuss divided attention at all, but now there's some studies looking at divided attention while we are driving, but they come up a bit later. If we ask the question, why do we selectively attend? Well, we have millions, remember, of 126 million per eye, millions of photoreceptors that are going to have to communicate to the lateral geniculate nucleus and to the visual cortex. And so if we didn't have any kind of selective attention, there would just be an overload of information all the time. What's hitting our eyes, it would be overwhelming. So in a lot of these studies, when they are looking at how we selectively attend, they use eye movements. And if you remember, I don't know if I said at the beginning of class when I talked about studying language, I studied eye movements in language, which is how I really, in reading behavior, which is how I ended up looking at perception very much at all, because there are many, many people looking at eye movements across visual scenes. But you have to keep in mind, okay, we can attend to places that our eyes are not looking, and we can miss information that we're looking at because our attention is someplace else. And we're going to talk a little bit about both of those things. When we attend to what we are looking at, this is called overt attention. When we attend without looking or fixating, this is called, and this is a conscious effort, this is called covert attention. So I usually give the example of when someone walks in the room and you're pretending to read, but really you're kind of checking them out in your peripheral vision. You're showing them. Your overt attention is not on the textbook or whatever you're reading, right? Your eyes are there, but your covert attention is on the person who just walked in the room. Okay, so there's this visual aspect, which again can be misleading or ambiguous about what we actually are paying attention to, but we often use eye movements to tell us about someone's attention. But there's also a mental aspect that we attend to what we agree to attend to. And this is according to William James. So I'm going to read this from the textbook. I usually have a student read this in class, and I just want to say again, don't know how many times I've said it. I miss you guys. I miss having class. I don't like talking all the time. And I talk enough in my classes, but I'm going to read this by William James, okay, from his 1890 textbook, Principles of Psychology. Millions of items are present to my senses, which never properly enter my experience. Why? Because they have no interest for me. My experience is what I agree to attend to. Everyone knows what attention is. It is the taking possession by the mind, in clear and vivid form, of one out of what seems several simultaneously possible objects or trains of thought. It implies withdrawal from some things in order to deal effectively with others. Okay, that makes it all sound very straightforward and kind of simple, that we just ignore what we don't want to attend to, and we attend to what we choose to attend to. And I usually ask students, what does this mean? Do you agree? Is this how you feel? And a lot of students do, interestingly to me. They say it's, at some level I'm choosing to attend to what I attend to, and I think it's important to think of at some level, at what level are we doing this? And usually I get at least one person, okay, who does have some ADHD, like me and my family, who are saying it really feels like sometimes I'm not, okay, that sometimes I want to pay attention to the difficult journal article that I'm reading, but the music that's coming from my neighbor's apartment or whatever, so I don't have those noises anymore as I live out in the country, but something else is kind of intruding, and I guess at some level we are agreeing to attend to that intrusion, but for some of us it is very difficult to pay attention to what we really want to attend to, and so sometimes it feels like maybe William James was an extremely intelligent person. He and his brother Henry James had a huge influence on our country and on our culture and everything. Obviously, super intelligent family. It was a much quieter time back in the late 19th century. You know, maybe they were really, truly attending to what they agreed to attend to. And maybe even those of us who are attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, maybe we are too at some level. But to me, it feels like sometimes it's really difficult to pay attention to what I really consciously want to attend to. So that's something to pause and think about, I think. So some of the mechanisms of selective attention, well, one is structural or anatomical, right? So the structure of the retina, that we have that all cone fovea, and really the wiring, right, of the cones that they are going to get direct lines to basically the visual cortex. And that we have a lot of convergence in the periphery, so that we get this cortical magnification in the cortex of the fovea. That anatomical part of our eyes allow us a lot of selective attention, that we point our eyes to what we want to look at. And if we want to see something in detail, like when I'm looking at the word retina on this screen, I have to put it on my fovea. If I'm looking anywhere else off the screen, I really can't see the detail of that. I'm paying attention to something else, visually anyway. They've looked at scanning a scene, so this kind of visual scanning, which requires moving that foveal fixation from place to place. And I used a really old eye tracker. I really liked it because it took a sample every millisecond, and it could see, or it could tell within a quarter of a character on the screen exactly where your eyes were. But now they have these camera-based eye trackers. People can, it was a clunky and uncomfortable eye tracker. But now they have these camera-based eye trackers that people can wear them and move their heads around, and we can still see pretty much where are they looking on a screen. And we see that they are making fixations. I'm going to go ahead and skip to fixations, that pause in movement when the eye is actually picking up information from the scene. They're also making these saccades, okay, these quick sweeping movements that the eye makes when it's going from one point to another. We also, as we're gathering information, we might make smooth pursuit eye movements. So if you take your finger in front of your face, or if you're outside and see a bird or something, you can just watch it in this kind of smooth pursuit. If you're watching it, that's called a smooth pursuit eye movement, and you're following a moving object. And it's different than a saccade in that what you are fixated on is going to the brain, and everything around it is inhibited. Okay, so you're really, if you kind of think about the peripheral vision while you're doing this pursuit movement, you'll notice that it's really blurry. Okay. Saccades, when we make saccades from one place to another, during the saccade, everything is completely suppressed. We are not taking in any visual information when we are making those saccades. We're really, we're utilizing that iconic memory of the last thing that we looked at to put together the visual world with the next thing that we look at. But the saccade itself is, that visual information is suppressed completely. And just so I usually do this and hope that it helps people remember the differences between these things. So for you all, if you are, so I'm taking my finger and I'm moving it across my scene, and I'm supposedly making smooth pursuit movements, and you are too. But I have schizophrenia in my family, and apparently something like 75% of people who have schizophrenia in their family, even if they aren't schizophrenic, are doing these really small, little tiny saccades during those pursuit movements. They're actually not making the smooth pursuit movements. They're making these little teeny tiny saccades. So that's just interesting factoid for any of you with schizophrenia in your family. As you're viewing a scene, we make about 3 fixations per second. And I really know none of this is going to work out the way it usually does, but I'm going to do my best with what I have. So I think he has a new picture in the book now, which I use later. But this is showing someone looking around the baseball field. I can't see where they started because it's too tiny on my screen, but they start somewhere. Those red lines are saccades. These are really fast eye movements where they're not picking up any visual information. And the little tiny yellow dots, those are fixations. Those are the pauses where they're taking in information from their visual scene. Okay, this might work a little bit. So I got this from Landmark College's Institute for Research and Training. I worked there for a while. Landmark College is a college where you can get an associate's degree, and it's specifically for people who have learning differences, who learn differently, and it teaches them really how to find their accommodations, how to take care of themselves in the college environment, and it gets them ready for the world of university and college. But what I'm going to show first is a quote normal person who is reading, and you'll see, so this shows, I think, the fixations and saccades much more clearly, as the red lines again are saccades, those quick movements from place to place, and the blue dots are fixations. And what you can see, they're still kind of hard to see, but you can see that they spent some time on described. They landed on vast. I can't really see where they landed because my eyes are so bad. Spider-like, maybe at the end of like. Okay, another thing you can see, and they're making a lot of saccades, and it looks like they come to the end of the first nearly 100 feet. They go back, and maybe they miss a little bit, and they regress and go back and forth a little bit, figure out where they are. You can see on the word intense, for whatever reason, when they were on the word beam of intense heat, that big blue dot, that's showing that they spent more time on that fixation. So the bigger the blue dot, the more time they spent on that particular fixation. And if we look at somebody who has a language-based disability, so probably dyslexia, you can see, and you might start to have some empathy for your friends who are dyslexic, that when they land on the word described, it takes some time, but look at the vast spider-like, these really low frequency words that we don't see. It's almost like you can just feel them decoding. I mean, it's just such, it takes them so much time. You can also see that they are making a lot more forward saccades and then regressions, so going back and forth as they are trying to figure out the words. So what determines where we fixate? Well, stimulus salience, cognitive factors, and the nature of the observer's tasks are all really important factors in where we end up making our fixations. I am at about 18 minutes, and I'm pretty sure this is right at the end of my time. I think I told myself 18 to 20 minutes for this one. So this will get us into the next bunch of until Monday when I see you. I'll see if I cannot figure out some ways for you all to be more involved as we continue to talk about visual attention.